Yes, then I guess we'll call to order the
Yeah.
meeting,
You just have to call to,
and I do, yes,
do you want to
what
call
we,
to order? And then also you'll have to reaffirm that we're operating under the resolution to have a virtual meeting that was voted on in May of last year.
and that we are doing. I don't have that in front of me, so we are operating on virtual meetings as approved by this body last year.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah. And then I think next up you would be asking for
Disposition of the minutes from the previous meeting. Everyone's had a chance to read the minutes.
Okay,
Here we are.
there I'm back. I had to leave the meeting. Did you see? It just put me on a phone
Yeah, it changed your audio source without you doing anything.
without my doing a thing. Yes.
Yep, we all saw it. We can testify.
Okay, good.
Marcy, one point here. I think Wendy already called the meeting to order. So Wendy, can you then hand over the chair to Marcy?
Marcy, you're back. The
I
chair
am
is
back now. Yes.
over to you. We're just about to go to the disposition of the minutes of the previous meeting.
Fine. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes of the previous meeting as given to us?
I move that we accept the minutes of the meeting as they have been given to us.
Thank you. I will accept everyone as an aye unless they tell me that they will not accept the minutes with a nay. Fine. So the minutes are accepted from the last meeting. Are there any announcements from board members? We've had a couple of our board members get recognition in local media lately. One of them that David was just pointing out was Kathy with a mention in an article in the Daily Progress, correct? Another was Lisa Woolfork, who had a lovely little article in the Seaville just after the last meeting on her stitch. Please. What is it, Lisa? It's
a podcast. It's a podcast. It's the
which is about sewing projects and social justice, is what I've understood. It's a really lovely little article.
Thank you.
So it's nice to have that recognition of board members doing work in the community. Thank you. Okay, no other announcements from the board. Are there any public comments? Please let David know that you have one by raising your hand.
Nobody's raising their hand, Marcy, and I didn't get any in advance.
Okay, good. We are scheduled to have a trustee continuing education on poetry projects within the library system. I'm assuming that Tim would be leading this off. Do we have Tim on? Oh, Tasha. Hi, Tasha.
Bring Tasha and then Tim. I see a JMRL Zoom. I bet that's probably Tim. Let's try this. It's gonna be Tim and Tasha. Hi, Tasha.
Okay, good. Unmute yourselves, please.
Hello.
And can you introduce yourselves? Hi, Tim.
Hi. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Carrier. I'm the Young Adult Services Manager with Jefferson Madison Regional Library. And here today to tell you a little bit about one of the initiatives that JMRL has been involved with for more than a decade now, and that is Poem in Your Pocket Day, one of several poetry-related events and initiatives that the library is involved with. This one will be taking place during National Poetry Month in April. To give you all just a little bit of a background about how the library got involved with Poem in Your Pocket Day, the event itself started less than 20 years ago. It was in 2002. Started by the Office of the Mayor in New York City, and that was done in partnership with the city's Department of Cultural Affairs and Education. And a few years later, the Academy of American Poets organization spread the initiative nationwide to encourage groups and organizations across the country to observe Poem in Your Pocket Day as part of its National Poetry Month events. And it was shortly after that it was brought to JMRL by the then Crozet branch manager, Wendy Saz. And so she had a lot of the ideas, the thoughts about how it could be observed already in place and in mind the first couple of years that the project was undertaken here. It developed definitely into a true community involved event, and in time a staff committee was developed of JMRL staff to plan the event every year. And so some of the components of JMRL's observation have included the committee obtaining permission from different copyright holders to print and duplicate a variety of poems each year that could then be distributed, handed out to people in the community. That included preparing the individual poetry slips. You may remember for many years, we would roll them into little scrolls and tie them with ribbons, and we would make them available in the library and to people all over the community. And the committee would also contact area businesses, organizations about sharing the poems with their clientele, so they would assist us in making the poems available to the people who patronize their businesses. The committee also organized a street team, and that would be JMRL staff and volunteers who would hand out the poems to passersby on the downtown mall and at UVA. And so those were all, different ways that we observed the event and spread the information about poetry and shared the joy of poetry with people in the community. And that happened with assistance from other JMRL staff and plenty of volunteers as well. And each year, several thousand of the little poem scrolls were distributed in the community. The committee worked hard to provide poems that were geared toward adults and toward children and teens. And we would also round out the poems that required permission with some in the public domain. So we had a broad variety of poems available, and we took a lot of care to make sure that there were a diverse group of authors, a wide variety of themes and backgrounds, so that there were truly poems that could be of appeal to a wide range of people in the community. In addition to handing out the poems, the committee worked to offer opportunities for local writers during this period. My colleague, who's currently at the Crozet Library as the branch manager, Haley Tompkins, organized a poetry contest for adults that has been going on every year for the last few years. And also at the Central Library, we've had a poetry reading called Poetry on the Steps. So those gave local writers the opportunity to share their work with the community as well. Now, the current committee, my colleague Brittany Eversberg co-chairs the committee with me, and also on the committee are Tasha Burkhead, Karen Gillespie, Tim Kerwin, Winchell, Chris Smith, and Alan Van Cleef. This year and last year, things have been a little bit different due to the issues surrounding COVID. Last year, we had received just about all the permissions that we needed to distribute the poems. And when the pandemic hit, clearly handing out little slips of paper was not necessarily going to be possible with the situations that were going on last year. So we were able to go back to some of the copyright holders and ask for permission to temporarily post some of the poems on the library's website. So they were up for a little while during April. And a number of JMRL staff recorded a favorite public domain poem. And these were put together into a podcast with the assistance of Abby Cox, who who runs the On the Same Page podcast for JMRL. So those were the ways that we were able to observe the event last year. This year, we're hoping to bring back some poetry to make available to the public. We're looking at working with some public domain poems and making them available during curbside and appointments. We're going to be talking with the Emergency Planning Committee about, various safety and contact questions regarding to that. We're also hoping to make a number of postings on JMRL's Facebook page, linking some of the poems that are on the Academy of American Poets website. The poetry contest for adults will take place in March. Haley works with Writer House to make that happen. And the prizes are funded in part by the Friends of the Library, as well as through the resources of Writer House. And there are a few other things that are in the works that we're working on. And when we have the publicity ready for Poem in Your Pocket Day this year, and by the way, the event itself is on April 29th this year, although a lot of what we're doing will kind of cover the month of April as it is. So it won't all be confined to just one day. But anyway, as we get our publicity together for Poem in Your Pocket Day, all of the other things that we're currently working on will be included there. So in a nutshell, that is how Poem in Your Pocket Day works at JMRL. And of course, we're excited about being able to observe it again this year. Before I turn the floor over to Tasha with some more immediate poetry events that are coming up even sooner, does anybody have any questions?
I think it's something that at our branch has actually been a very popular activity, and I know we'll all be glad to get back to being able to give those little slips of paper out. But in the meantime, you're doing a great job.
Thank you so much. And we've had wonderful feedback over the years. People would tell us every year that they looked forward to it every year and they remembered it. So in time, it's become something that is known in the community, which is wonderful. All right, well, I will turn the floor over to Tasha, and she has some more wonderful things to talk about.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Tasha Burkhead, and I am a young adult librarian
Hi, Tasha.
at the Central Ranch. And I just wanted to let you guys know what we've been doing for the past year and a half, working on the program with a grant that's called Lift Every Voice. And I just want to give you a little bit of background about Lift Every Voice. Lift Every Voice is a year-long national celebration of 250 years of African-American poetry. With the events that's happening, there are several different things going around the country, such as readings, performances, moderated conversations in public libraries, and also just different buildings and mostly online due to COVID. But all of this is surrounding the publication of Struggles and Songs, 250 Years of Poetry, that is edited by Kevin Young. And its aim is to highlight the richness and diversity of African-American poetry, and also to give people a perspective of what and why African-American poetry matters. And some of the history there in African-American poetry is the history that is not in a textbook. Some of the poems are different myths that you hear, and some of the poems are history that could not be written down. So it's so important that we put this forth. And since we are doing so many programs of poetry, as you've heard from Tim, and some other different programs that we are going through with inclusiveness, we figured that this grant would be a perfect partnership with us. So with that said, the requirement was to produce 2 programs, and we would choose a theme. And the theme that we chose was family and community, which I felt that was the closest to what Charlottesville needs right now in our community since we are still healing. And instead of coming up with 2 programs, we came up with 5. And David, you have the first slide that shows a list of all of the programs. And this lovely slide was done actually by our sub, Erica Kavanaugh. That's the one, David. As you can see, my team went beyond. Tim is on that team as well as many talented librarians and staff members who've helped with this, and I'm very grateful for that. But first of which, if you haven't tried it, dial a poem. Each week there's a different poem that you can dial and listen to. Then there is the next one is the virtual poetry reading, and then the teen art gallery, the panel, and then the Get Lit. David, can you go to the next slide, please? The Evening with Black Poets is our big one. So we actually tapped into all of our resources and got some local Black poets that are very prominent in our community. And they will be in on Thursday to answer some questions and to read poetry. And it's just going to be a beautiful event. David, go ahead to the next. The teen virtual poetry reading happened this past weekend. I hope you were able to see it. The teens came together in just a wonderful way, and I'm so proud of them. And they took their time out to read these poems, and it's just beautiful. Go to the next slide, David. Today sometime we'll be launching the art gallery in partnership with the Charlottesville High School art teachers. We have over 50 artworks that are connected to the poems in the anthology. So they're beautiful. I've already seen them. Jessie Lane will be putting something together, and it should be sometime today. And this is going to run all the way to March. And the next slide, David. And this is the dollar poem, of course. And I hope you hear the last one this week. It should be up soon as well. And I believe there's one more. Did I send you that last one, David? Okay, that's okay. That one is the Get Lit. And that is the African American Poetry book group that myself and Myra Anderson will be running, and we are going to be reading Brown Girl Dreaming. And as you all may know, that Jacqueline Woodson will be with the same page, and we felt that that was a good partnership there. So we're very happy about that. And so I wanted to just go over what we wanted to get out of this. And basically we wanted to spread the celebration of Black poetry and how beautiful it is, and what we can see through the struggles. And they really meant struggles in song. It's just a beautiful thing to put on the cover. And it has been a great labor of love is what I call it, to do this. And I'm really enjoying it. And I'm just so proud of everyone who has participated and continue to participate and help in this, what JMRL is doing. Thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions from anyone for Tasha?
Sounds wonderful.
A huge amount of work too, Tasha. Thank you to you and everybody who was on the committee for doing that. It's a great way to advertise library services to people who might not otherwise have come into contact with them yet.
Yes. So, hi, this is Lisa. I had a question. Again, well done. I think it's really a great job. There's so much to be excited about. And I really love the name. I think that's so clever. That's so clever. And I wanted to hear more, if you could talk a bit more about like how the reading groups or book groups have been affected by COVID, because often one of the best parts about a book group is sitting around in community and talking about the book. Have you all had to transition to an online delivery mode, or like how has that changed, or how do you envision that changing, and what ways are you thinking about to kind of keep that community focus going with you and Myra as facilitators?
Right now, as far as my teen book groups, and I'm hoping that it'll translate the same way, where we meet online virtually. And what we do is we send all the books through curbside, and they seem to be able to be getting them, and also send an email to
Right.
them and telling them that I have sent them and they will be there within a few days. They will contact the branch, and the branches seem to be very receptive with them. And as far as when we meet, I usually have a nice format with that, and hopefully we'll have in the future people to be very connected and able to sign on using the Zoom platform. And for most of the book groups, they've been going pretty well as far as attendance, and I hope that the same thing goes with this one.
Thank you. Mike, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, so great work, and I think these sound like fantastic programs. I have sort of a tangential observation. Some of these are in the recent past, but I had not, as just a library patron, heard about some of these. So it's just a reminder to me of the importance of really thinking carefully and proactively about how we get the word out to the community. I'm sure we've done social media. I know that some of these are calendar events that show up on right now on the homepage. But I would point out, I mean, I know we had I forget the exact name, but there was a working group a year or two ago, kind of focusing on this topic. I'd point out that every curbside pickup, and I have picked up from curbside 3 or 4 times in this time period, is an opportunity to get one of these beautiful posters, you know, and is in a quarter page of paper into the hands of someone and get the word out about whatever we're focusing on. So I just like to raise that as a really important. It's all the great work we do. The more people, it is only effective to the extent that people know about it. So the more people that know about what we're doing, the more effective we'll be. I would put it that way. So just encourage us to keep the importance of that in the front of mind.
Mike, I just wanted to add to what you were saying. We are actually in works right now with Vinegar Hill magazine, and they're going to be posting some online ads for us, as well as a Daily Progress ad. So we're trying to get it out there as many places that we wouldn't normally put things, and also foot traffic putting things up as well. And also the bookmarks to all those programs should be in your curbside bag as well.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I thought it was on a bookmark. I love bookmarks. I thought I had a bookmark.
I agree with Mike about getting it out. I belong to a Baptist church in Charlottesville, and we have online information about programs that are going on. And my pastor is also a member of the Black Pastors Council. So please contact Mount Zion First African Baptist Church at 105 Langford Avenue, because I can only think about those individuals that wanted to be a part of the book club last year. And sometimes older people are not always on the internet and all of these wonderful things. So reach out, please. But I think you're doing a phenomenal job, and keep it up.
Thank you.
David, did you have a comment or a question?
Tasha mentioned most of it. I was going to mention the advertising that's coming up for the big program this week, tomorrow in the Daily Progress. But I also wanted to briefly give a shout out to both Tim and Tasha for really being at the forefront of virtual programming too for JMRL. Both of them have really been working very hard in the last year to make that transition from the in-person that Lisa was talking about to these virtual events, and their committee meeting, the Young Adult Committee, was one of our first, even before the pandemic, to allow for virtual representation. So this Lift Every Voice is on Thursday, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Tasha or Tim, I believe is going to be our first program also broadcast on Facebook Live.
Correct.
You don't necessarily need to have the exact Zoom account from our Facebook page. You'll be able to see it on Thursday night too. So a lot of efforts gone in, tremendous amount for both of these programs. And I'm very proud of the work that both of these folks have done.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Tasha, and thank you, Tim. I think
you
it's
both.
helpful for the board to hear these things. Somebody, you have a comment, Kathy?
No, that was
Anybody?
just me saying thank you on top of you saying thank you. Just
Oh, okay.
gratitude.
All right. But thank you very much for coming and letting us know what you're doing. It's important for us to keep up with all of the work that's being done by the staff to try to keep our community together during these trying times. Okay. So we'll move on to new business. There's some issues about the current year's funding that the budget committee met about in the last week or so, and Thomas will be talking to us about what the committee is going to recommend to the board.
Thank you, Marcy. Yeah, we sat down to discuss the not surplus, but extra funds that are can't be carried over at the end of the year, would exceed our 5% allowable general fund cap. So we discussed a few different options for a one-time payment to staff that would take up most of that excess funding. The option that we settled on was staff would receive $1,000 for full-time and $500 for all part-time and substitute employees. JMRL would cover the extra costs to make that the take-home amount for staff. And David, I don't have my notes from that meeting in front of me. I apologize, but help me out with the exact amounts. It leaves about 16,000 out of the total sum that we were working with, which would be moved into the materials budget at the end of the year. And David can help me with those exact numbers.
Sure. Yeah, I've got them here. So the total amount was 158,000 for the one-time lump sum payments to staff, and then up to 20,000 to supplement the materials budget in this fiscal year. So between now and the end of June.
Just so that everybody understands where this money came from, there was a rebate to the library system from the city of Charlottesville that had to do with excess payments into employee retirement funds that weren't used but had been scheduled. Plus, because of the limitations on hiring for positions that were open over the course of the pandemic year, there were some funds that were not expended just for staff. One of the things that the budget committee had wanted to try to do was to take a page from some of the local jurisdictions and how they are handling extra payments in lieu of cost of living increases for their staff, which didn't happen this year. And so these recommendations that the committee made are very much in line with Albemarle, Nelson, and several of the other jurisdictions in terms of what they're doing to supplement income for their employees this year, assuming that we'll be able to go back to giving cost of living increases at some point in the near future, hopefully in 2022. Is that fair, David?
Yeah, thank you. That was the point that I wanted to make as well. So the library staff did not receive a raise this current year. So next year, we are still hoping that we will have a 2% cost of living raise for staff, and we'll get into that when we talk about the budget a bit today. So this is not in lieu of, but it's in recognition that staff did not get a cost of living raise this year.
Are there any questions for Thomas or for David about these funds and the recommendation that the Budget Finance Committee made?
Can you just explain, hey, this is Carla. Can you just explain how it will affect substitutes again?
The scenario that the budget committee voted to recommend to the full board today included paying substitute employees the same as the part-time employees. The cutoff line was 30 hours and above would be considered full-time. for the one-time lump sum payment. And then anybody under that, including substitutes, would receive $500. And thank you, Carla, for bringing that up, because as you know, the substitute employees are at the bottom end of the JMRL pay scale and are not eligible for benefits or annual raises. So this is in recognition also of the work that substitute staff did throughout this past year in order to keep JMRL operational.
I also wanted to mention that I believe the city also gave their staff essentially like a bonus with some of the refund money that they earned from like these actuarial costs or whatever. So David, hadn't they told us that they had given their folks a bonus?
Yeah, they definitely did last year out of CARES funding, which quite a few of our jurisdictions were able to do. And of course, JMRL as a regional authority had no access to that federal funding. It was relief funding to help jurisdictions handle COVID costs. And I know Charlottesville used some of that to give some bonus pay to staff.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments about this?
David, this is Wendy. Did you hear from Louisa on what they did with their relief funding?
I know they were able to give some bonuses. They spent their relief funding on a lot of needs for the county, immediate needs. But I also believe that they gave some bonuses. I'm not sure what the stipulations were, whether it was to all staff or first responders or whatnot. I'd have to reach out and ask about that.
Okay, I will. I'll ask Kristen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
So in terms of timing, Marcy, the Albemarle County is going to be giving their one-time payments out in April, and JMRL was looking to match that. So I think this board, I've got a motion prepared if you're ready to vote today. Otherwise, you can consider it and vote on it in your March meeting, and staff will get the apparatus running with the assumption that people are on board.
Can you post the text of that? Do you have that, or do you want to just read it to us?
No, there it is. I was just reading it.
There you go. Okay.
I'm comfortable with it. I mean, I think we had 3 or 4 board members at the budget committee meeting where we were the finance meeting where we were discussing this, and didn't seem, I don't know, seemed like it was going to work.
I think it wasn't very controversial.
Right.
It was, I thought it was a good meeting, and you know, we thought what we were doing was fair and you know, and just responsive. So I thought, you know, that's why we voted for it.
Good.
So
So
if you're
to
looking,
be clear, the proposed bonuses that will be given would be $1,000 to each staff member who's working 30 hours a week or more, and $500 to staff member working less than 30 hours a week, and also to the substitute staff.
Correct.
I'm happy to make this motion now if the board would like to vote on it today.
Thank
I'm
you.
all in favor of moving the process forward. Sure.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Carla. So we have a motion from Carla.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Is there anyone opposed to this? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks, David.
Thank you all.
All right, moving on to the committee appointments and reports. I think we'll begin with Carla with the Personnel Committee, which has met fairly recently. Correct, Carla?
Yeah, we just met last week, and we basically had 3 major points of discussion, one of which we'll bring to the board today. So first of all, during our meeting, we heard from Michael Powers regarding the employee handbook work group that he's leading. Obviously, you know, there's a little bit of overlap between the policy and the personnel committee on a handbook that's going to affect employees. And so Michael brought us up to speed on what's been done. And then members of the personnel committee were invited to, share their ideas about the outline that's been created. And we'll just do that over the next, I guess, year and a half, really, that the process might take. But I don't think we felt like we needed to actually serve on the employee handbook working group. So I think we have it covered just by, providing our input on the document. The other thing is, at the previous personnel committee, committee meeting, we had broken it up into 2 subgroups to tackle different big issues. And the subcommittee that I'm working with is looking at a minimum wage of $15 per hour. And we had a preliminary meeting with Albemarle County HR to kind of talk about how they've brought their employees up to, what they consider a living wage at $15 an hour. They're actually in the process of bringing county school employees up to that minimum wage as well. And so we're going to meet with them again this week to kind of look at more details about how they're doing it, how it might affect us, and just to get their input on actual numbers and everything. I did want to just mention that I think there was some confusion about the $15 becoming minimum wage, but that is in the Virginia Code. And so this year, this actual calendar year, the minimum wage is going from the $7.25 federal rate to $9.50 an hour. And we don't have any employees that are making that low of a rate. But at the beginning of next calendar year, the Virginia minimum wage will jump to $11. And once again, we've already budgeted for that in our upcoming fiscal year budget. And then basically the minimum wage will jump to $12 at the beginning of 2023, and then $13.50 at the beginning of 2025, and eventually $15 at the beginning of 2026. And so what we're asking the county to kind of advise us on is how can we move this process along a little bit? And they're going to help us with some formulas. And also, they already did a survey of local employers to see who was at a $15 minimum wage or living wage, whatever you want to call it. So we'll have more to report on that in the next, probably in the next month or so. David, am I missing anything on that?
No, I think that really nailed it. So the big thing is to try to figure out how to meet those benchmarks and not have a compression issue like JMRL just got to the other side of, because if we start, if we were just to immediately raise everyone to that level, then there's the next level right above that that needs consideration. It's at like 1520 or something now. So we need to figure out how
and David gave us these numbers. Currently, 51 of our 126 employees make less than $15 an hour. And it really is our core group of employees, those support people that you see, at the desk doing programs, that sort of thing. So it's a big chunk of JMRL's workforce. Okay, so the biggest thing that we talked about, as you may remember, we had a question about increasing the leave accrual rates. And this had come up really, when there was a question about like, why was our accrual rate different than the city's accrual rate? And David, do you have the research? Do you have a slide of the research that was done?
Sure.
The other subcommittee led by Thomas did research, and they looked at leave accrual standards for JMRL, for our funding localities, for UVA, and then for a couple of other regional library systems. And what we had thought is that you would really see a big difference around that 5-year mark. We thought we were really lagging behind. And so the top row is JMRL, and you can see that we're pretty comparable with, our funding agencies. If you look down at these other regional library systems, which are rows 11 and 12, I don't know how they're doing it, because they have like these crazy amounts of leave. I'm not really sure that people are even able to take this amount of leave, in a practical world. Like, how do you have staff coverage then? So we're pretty good in the years 0 through 3, and then even 3 through 5. But you can see, and then we thought, it'd be like at 5 years, we really were at a deficit. But the truth is, you don't notice a difference until you see people who have been with the organization for 10 years. And they really are, the accrual rate is quite a bit less than our funding localities. So we currently have the folks at 120, and then everybody at least at 140. Sorry, I don't know who that is. And then once you get to 15 years, our accrual rates seem relatively similar to what our funding localities are doing.
Carla, can I jump in real quick just to explain one thing?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So this is just vacation accrual we're looking at here. I'll scroll down a little bit to show the accumulation of vacation and sick, because some of like the CRRL is Central Rappahannock. They don't include sick time in these numbers up here. So maybe the better graph to be looking at is not a graph, is this one here, which shows the total leave, sick and vacation, and the red pipe at the end denotes where there's a change. So you can see only Charlottesville has a change after 3 years of service, which is what the proposal was, that we would change after 3. Everybody changes after 5 years. Everybody but JMRL changed after 10 years of service, and then it kind of branches out from there. So sorry, I just wanted to let folks know what we're looking at.
No, that's really helpful.
Carla, can I make an observation too? That one of the key things with leave accrual is how much you can roll over per year. When UVA employees changed from being classified state employees to university employees, which was about 15 years ago, we were all given the option of becoming university employees, or we could stay classified state employees. I stayed a classified state employee because I am allowed to roll over 432 hours, even if I never use it. So, I think there's the actual, and I can't get that paid out, but I can use that or roll it over to the next year. So I think that's also an important thing to consider.
Yeah, and David, what is, I can never remember the formula, but what is the rollover allowed?
Yeah, I'm going to get in trouble here. I think it's what you can accumulate in 1 year plus 1 week.
Pay period, I believe was what that did come up at our meeting as well about that. And I think that's right. It was 1 year plus what you work in 1 pay period.
I believe that's right. And so it goes up as your accrual rate goes up.
Right.
And sick time, you can accrue in perpetuity. You can accrue as much as you need, but there is no payout for that, similar to what Tony said. So there's no liability.
Excuse me.
Is there a situation where if someone became really ill and needed additional time, is it a policy somewhere where you can share your sick time
There
or
is,
put it in a bank?
there is not, Kathy, thank you. But I did ask that of each of the jurisdictions when I asked them what their leave accrual rates were, because that was a question the personnel committee had. And it's something I'm interested in adding for JMRL down the road. It was a mixed bag. About half of them offered some sort of like leave bank, sick bank type thing. So if somebody needed it, they could donate it rather than have it not roll over for them.
Okay, and I think you answered this one. If they retire, do they get paid for a portion of the sick time if they've not used it?
Vacation time, you do get paid a portion of sick time. You only do if you're on the pension plan, which JMRL no longer offers to new employees. So prior to anyone on this board, I believe, the library board made a decision not to offer a pension plan for new employees, but instead to offer a 401 plan, basically. If you're on that one, you do not get a payout for sick. If you're on the pension plan, it counts towards your years of service. So you don't get a payout for it, but it counts towards how many years there, so you can retire earlier than the kind of 30-year benchmark.
Thank you.
So what the subcommittee, and actually what the whole personnel committee agreed to was that we really think that once you've reached that 10 years of service, that there should be an increase in your leave accrual rate. And so, yeah, there we go. So this is what, this is the breakdown if you're part-time to full-time. And I actually do have written, David's been very kind to me and has provided me with a motion that would simplify what I'm saying. Go ahead, let me bring that up real fast, okay?
So what the city does with this interim period, so JMRL currently increases leave accrual at the end of 5 years and at the end of 15 years. What they do in the interim is to add half of that amount. So if you're a full-time employee, after the end of 5 years, you would get 80 hours. And at the end, I'm sorry, 120 hours. At the end of 15 years, you currently get 160. It would split the difference. At 10 years, you would get 140. And that kind of scales back down for all the other accrual rates.
And so right now there are 14 employees who fall between the 10 and 15 years of service that would be affected in this fiscal year if we change the leave accrual rate.
And to clarify, it's not a retroactive thing. It would be moving forward. This is how much you begin to accrue. It wouldn't be going back and adding on.
Correct.
Intermediary time.
So based on what the research that the personnel committee did, what I'm going to suggest is that JMRL add an annual leave accrual period between 10 and 15 years of service. And so the chart here shows 40-hour employees between the 10 and 15 years of service will accrue 140 vacation hours annually. Those employees who work 30 to 39 hours will accrue 105 vacation hours annually. Those employees who work 20 to 29 hours annually will accrue 70 hours. And those employees who work 10 to 19 hours, sorry, I didn't mean annually, I meant weekly, between 10 and 15 years of service will accrue 35 hours annually. Sorry, it's very confusing. Should I read it again?
I think you're okay. Does anyone have questions about what Carla's proposing?
Here's the
I
wording.
don't see any evidence of question. What?
Thank you, David.
I just put up the wording that Carla was referring to there.
Okay, I'm looking to see if anybody, I don't see any hands raised, so I think everybody's clear on what you're
I
proposing.
think the chart, it might be easier to read.
Well, I move the JMRL add an annual leave accrual period between 10 and 15 years of service.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
I think that's probably good enough there, Thomas, for the.
The details are by
Sure.
the chart.
Okay, yeah. Well, I move that we add an annual leave accrual period between 10 and 15 years of service as shown in the chart that we discussed earlier.
Yeah, great.
May I ask a question about that? Are you intending to do this immediately or to begin at the 1st of July? What is the proposal here?
Well, that's at the board's, it's what you decide. It wouldn't be until the beginning of a month when accruals start.
Yes,
So,
I understand.
it's Zach that will have to recode things in order to make sure people are getting the correct numbers now, but I'm confident we could get that done for March if the board wants to start immediately. If you wanted to start in July, that would be fine too.
Carla, was that something that was discussed in committee in terms of when's this?
I think we were thinking that it would be an immediate, it would go into effect immediately.
I don't think that we discussed it in specific, but yeah, that's definitely what I kind of had in mind. And I think in discussing the financial impact and the way that this, because it just sort of increases the accrual, but not until we have somebody leave and have a payout that changes, there's not the immediate impact. I think that that's kind of what we were getting at around that discussion. So I feel comfortable going ahead and saying effective immediately.
Yeah.
Fine.
I also think that it came before the board several times, and so it was taken to the personnel committee to basically do this research and to have this discussion. And so I do feel like it's something that's of this fiscal year.
Well, Thomas has made a motion to that we begin this immediately as an addendum to his original motion. Is there any further discussion on this?
A second.
Thanks, Kathy. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Hi.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Say no. Thank you. This has been passed unanimously then, and we will begin immediately offering increased leave accrual at 10 years of service.
And I just wanted to say thanks to Thomas and thanks to the staff for doing all that research.
Thanks to the staff.
It's a little technical. It's a little like fiddly, and I don't think we would have understood the issue otherwise.
Marcy contributed quite a bit as well.
Thank you, Marcy.
You're welcome. All right, thanks, Carla, very much. Your committee is really doing yeoman's service right now.
And we'll have more once we meet with the county again.
Okay, good. We'll look forward to that. The next thing that we have is actually a double report. Mike Powers will give us an update on the policy committee meeting from today, and also an update on the employee handbook working group report that he presented to the personnel committee.
Okay, so we'll start. David, if you can share a screen with the employee handbook working group. And we talked about this at the last meeting, and so I'm going to try and keep it brief. I think you're all aware that this work is going on and what the goals and purpose and motivation of it is. So this is just going to be sort of a status report for today. At the last meeting, I think I had told you we had kind of zeroed in on a list of chapters or sections of an employee handbook. And we're meeting, by the way, about every 2 weeks. I'm trying to keep it to 10 days to 2 weeks. We seem to be landing about every 2 weeks, but we're making really, I'm very excited about the progress that this is mostly driven by staff making a lot of these contributions, but we've fleshed out the list of chapters or topics, or I'm sorry, yeah, I would call them chapters with specific topics that need to be covered in each section. And but by the end of our next meeting, which is I guess about 10, I think it's a week from Wednesday, we intend to send sort of a late version draft of the list of topics to the full staff, and also we'll include the trustees in that. And the goal would be, right now, again, we're just kind of brainstorming. Here's everything that an employee needs to know kind of day to day. And we want to get that list of topics nailed down. So this would be feedback on what the topics that need coverage would be, not the scope of what the specific policy or procedure for any particular topic would be. That's going to be the next round after that, is starting filling out the specifics, but just getting those topics identified. So that's sort of where we are, and the time frame of the next step or milestone in the near term, about 2 weeks from now. Any comments or questions on employee handbook?
Just for me, I think it's a great project. I know it's going to take a fair amount of time from everybody, and I really think the board needs to offer its thanks to Mike. And
Well, don't thank me yet, but
I was just going to say thank you for
Mike. I mean, the idea of bringing this to the forefront is something that you have had.
So thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's a lot of work too, like meeting every week.
But I think it's going to be terrifically helpful for the organization going forward.
So it is a lot of work, and I just want to emphasize, I am not doing all the work, or even I'm doing some stuff and trying to keep things organized and moving, but really staff and a couple of branch managers who volunteered for this working group are really doing a lot of this, and I've been excited to see that they're, we keep coming up. We had a great discussion at the last meeting, mostly the staff saying, well, hey, this needs to be covered, or hey, this comes up kind of day to day. And I think they are excited to have it all written down in one place. A lot of these, again, are practices that we already do. It's sort of a cultural thing, or sort of just understood that this is kind of how it works. But getting it organized into one place where it's available as a reference, and where it's consistent between branches, is something that not just me, but it seems like everybody's sort of pretty excited about that, getting to that end goal. So yes, there's a lot to do between now and then. Okay, then I'll move to the Personnel Committee. We I think we'll talk about, so the last board meeting, we did no, this is not true. I'm confusing myself. We're at a first reading, David, of, help me out here, of conduct and portraits as far as the board is concerned. Is that true?
It's a first reading of portraits. Conduct, I believe that we looked at already.
Yes.
So we could vote on that today if you like. You all could vote on it.
I feel like we,
it's fine to put it for next month too.
yeah, we put, we did there's nothing content wise, the content is about the same, but we did some significant wordsmithing that I think the board didn't see last month. I think I'd just as soon
We'll take this as a read through for both of those policies.
Yeah, I think that's the right thing to do. So we'll start with conduct then. You saw, so this was included, is this true that it was included in the board handouts?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this has been included in the board handouts, and so you've got a good preview of sort of this revised version. Today, again, we're just going to do a quick read through. There in today's policy committee meeting, we just finalized this. That's the first time the policy committee had discussed that draft, and there were just a few tweaks to the draft that you saw in your handouts, reversing the order of some wording in this first intro sentence, some periods. So the red is not changes from today. Those were things you saw in your handout. So I think I can scroll through since it's a read through. Again, in the primary section, which is the actual list A through, of number 1, there's nothing that's brand new here. There's just some refinement of, and that comes from the branch managers thought we were in the right place, for what they needed day to day as far as conduct. So we'll have this is being introduced today, and then we'll present that for a vote. The finalized version, I think, can just be cleaned up. I think this can all be merged, David, into one. I think it doesn't need red lines probably for next month's.
No, and the only change was switching functional and welcoming in the first line, and then punctuation. There was a scintillating period discussion.
Yeah, it was. We almost got a semicolon in there, but it didn't quite happen.
That's hilarious. That speaks to my word nerd heart. I was like, oh man.
Exactly. The word semicolon was invoked during discussion, but I think I'm saying that we can turn this off. We can take out all the strike throughs probably for next month's handout, and just show you this will be the final thing that's proposed. Okay, so with that, unless there are comments or questions here, and again, next month will be the actual discussion of, because it'll come to you in the form of a motion. Then we can move to portraits in libraries. This was not included in the board's handout, so that today again also is the first readout, but the policy committee got to a point where it is ready to propose it for adoption. So again, what you'll see next month, we'll present it for adoption. Essentially, just making it short and sweet. The policy committee felt that we do want to kind of maintain our restriction that portraits are a thing that we generally don't do. The portraits that are already in place are sort of grandfathered, so to speak. I don't think we would use that exact word, but that's the concept. And this gives the director and staff guidance and also a tool going forward if it comes up in fundraising or in other contexts, hey, or donations. Hey, we're interested in a portrait as a part of some sort of donation. I think it's the committee's thought that it's a good line to draw, that hey, we just don't do that going forward. We can recognize contributions in other ways with plaques and potentially and so forth. So again, this is what you'll see next month. Any kind of initial thoughts or comments or questions here?
I have some. I'm looking at the portraits that we currently have, and did anybody talk about interest in taking those down? So, I personally am interested in taking those down.
Right. So I think that certainly that's something to discuss. This is more of a going forward. I think the intended scope of this is going forward. What do we do with the idea of having new portraits?
Because it seems like if we're not going to get rid of the old portraits, then it might be nice to have new portraits to contextualize and balance.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a valid point.
This seems a little weird. I'm concerned that these portraits I love the strike through. It really does warm my heart to see a strike through Thomas Jefferson's name on any piece of paper. But what I'm interested in is, it seems to be it seems to be enshrining them even more by saying that the portraits that we have must stay there. The ones we used to have must always stay, and there won't be any new ones.
I definitely wouldn't read it that way, and I don't think that's the intent. And so if we need to clarify that, we can. I don't think this says anything that the portraits must stay. It's just saying that it is saying that we're not requiring them to be removed. There is a difference.
What is that difference?
The difference is that tomorrow staff or the appropriate decision-making body there's nothing here that prevents those portraits from being removed.
Can I just add one thing here? Is that this is also an incomplete list, those 3 names that are on there. There are other portraits that are in the library system. There's a portrait in Louisa of someone who helped to build that building there, Miss Eugenia Bumpus. And then there's also a portrait at Gordon Avenue in the African-American collection of Mr. Roland Buford, which is also kind of a staff memorial thing because the library or whatnot. So I think the idea of getting rid of those names was also to allow for the other existing portraits that may be there for, for whatever reasons that aren't related to the history of the area, but are more specific to the library.
We have 3 in Louisa.
Who are the 3 in Louisa?
Well, the one I know is Ms. Bumpus, but there are 2 others next to her who were instrumental in some way. You can see they made an impression on me.
Thomas?
I do think so. I think you've raised a valid subject for discussion. I think the intent here that this is not it's not the same scope as what I think the intent here. But certainly, if the intent is not clear, we need to clarify with language. The intent not to say that. The intent is really forward-looking. So say going forward, regardless of what may or may not be in place right now, going forward, we're not going to add new stuff. Now, and if you're saying maybe that should be open, then this would be in conflict. This would prevent the idea of adding new portraits for whatever reason. So if that's something that you think we should.
I just think it's something to think about. I'm going to let Thomas go ahead and speak, and then I'll come back. I'll actually raise my hand to get on the line.
All right.
I was just going to support what you were saying. I agree with you, Lisa, that I think what this could do is sort of freeze in place the history that we have in the building without allowing new context. But I'm interested to know a little bit more about, Michael. I mean, I think you make a perfectly good point there too, that all this is doing is saying we're not going to hang new pictures. It doesn't say anything about keeping the ones that are already there. So but it seems to me that still sort of presents a fork in the road of having portraits at all in the building versus sort of what portraits do you have? How do you have that discussion, and who's included in that? And I don't know that the sort of cutoff is handling that. Well, I don't know. I'll just stop it there. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Lisa,
Yes.
you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. So I think that what I am seeing is that I think the concerning part is will be restricted. And then the last phrase, that were accepted in libraries before this policy was adopted. That is a huge gap of history, that before this policy was adopted. Like, what we're celebrating a big anniversary here. And it does feel to me like it's enshrining it. So I don't know. It just feels like this is a way to keep Thomas Jefferson and James Madison enshrined in the library, especially since I know there's been some talk of people wanting to change the name of the entire system from Jefferson Madison Regional Library to something else. And so if we say these 2 portraits will be here forever, then that means that we really aren't interested in even having a conversation about name changes and other changes that I know some community members are interested in advocating for.
I'll just throw in, just for some context, the other option that the policy committee was discussing was removing this policy, period. was not having this policy in place.
But what would that mean then, David, if there was like no policy about portraits in libraries?
Well, for one, I mean, the way I was looking at it was, is this really an issue? Like, how many people are showing up and giving portraits? I think that's what, I think the context that the policy committee was using was that this is about gifts. This is about somebody coming to the library and saying, hi, I want to give you $1 million to build a wing here, but it has to have a picture of, whoever that, my cat or something. So I think the idea here was that it's not happening, and we could handle that on an individual basis. I don't know that there was a broader discussion about what the library itself, we did, when we talked about staff memorials, we got into it a bit because it's another policy that's on the agenda for next month. But I don't think the conversation was necessarily about like, what does the library want to have up there? It was about what we would accept moving forward. But I hear exactly what you're saying. And I think that we need to rethink this before we bring it back.
I just wanted to run, just because my context is coming from work and advocacy about the statues in Charlottesville and all of these things about like the Lee statue was a gift, and now we have all these court battles still, believe it or not, about the dispositions of those. And I feel like we're at the early stages of writing something that would say, I don't know, I guess it's the will be restricted is the thing. And those are the two lines that really catch up to me. It will be restricted before the strikes out. But it is essentially saying that whatever we have there now should stay, and we will not add anything new. Yeah. Like it's like putting a freeze on it. That's what it looks like to me, but maybe I'm mistaken in that, but that's just what I'm seeing.
I think Mike's point was that, if that's what you're seeing, then clearly we need to go back and address to clear the language up.
So clearly, so I think we should take this back to the committee, certainly, and discuss, in light of the comments. What I think I'm trying to understand, Lisa, there's a distinction between to me, there's two questions. What do we do with what's there now? And it's certainly a valid topic for discussion. And then separately, related but separate, what do we do in the future when the idea comes up of we could have a portrait of, person X? I think it's clear it seems to me clear from your perspective is that question number one should be open for discussion. Everything should be on the table in terms of whether we keep or don't keep things that are there now. And you'd like the language to reflect that. So that's what I'm hearing, and correct me if I haven't captured that.
Yeah. Okay, yes, so I think that is right. That the idea that the things that are there now need not be permanently there. Okay, and I don't think that's the intent of what is here, but we'll need to figure out some language. So maybe if you have a suggestion, offline, you can email exactly what that would look like. I think just change the word will to may. May, yeah, okay. So let's put that for just a note for that. And then question two, I'm just curious for your opinion, if you have one formed at this moment, going forward, would it be important to leave the door open for new portraits? I think the discussion today was, well, we just want to close that door as a sort of a venue for for new displays in terms of. Now we also, as a side note, in our discussion, we drew a distinction between exhibits, which might include images of people, and we felt that this should not and does not exclude exhibits. But do you have an opinion? No, I think that I feel maybe if what you're concerned about is people giving you gifts, then I think we can keep it as it is, right? Like donations of portraits. Like you don't want to accept just any donation of a portrait. That doesn't, unless this policy also governs if the library itself decides to put up portraits. If I read it as, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, go ahead. So that's what I'm trying to understand. Yeah. I'm trying to see, is there space for, if the library wants to put up a portrait, that they can do so and they don't have to be limited by the works that are already there.
Right. If I read it as written, I would say that it would apply to the library, that that going forward, it's the library's policy. We don't put up any more portraits, whether that was initiated by a gift or by the library itself.
And I think that that should be a little more open. I think maybe not taking an unsolicited gift of a portrait or a gift of a portrait, but I don't know, the idea that there's not going to be any more portraits, it really does limit it to what's already there. And I like the idea of like, well, of course I like, because I made up the word. Well, I didn't make up the word. You know what I'm saying? May give some flexibility that will does not give. So that seems fine. It's just that last line about there will be no more portraits, because I feel as though contextualization might be a solution for people who will one day want the portraits just gone. Okay. And there's also the option to just take them down if you want, because the word may is there.
Right. Okay, so thank you for clarifying those, and we'll take it back to the committee and come back after that.
Great, thank you so much for your work on that. I know it's a lot, so thank you.
Well, it's funny because it's very short sentences, but you're right that there's a lot of implications, but in various directions.
If I could just say one last thing on that, I think what Lisa just offered there is a really elegant solution. Because you had identified that part of the problem with the statues conversation is the argument over these things being presented to the city or county or whatever as a gift. If the library is hanging portraits of its own volition, I would assume that we can take them down just as easily if we change our mind in the future without having to engage in those sorts of conversations about a relative of mine made a donation that involved the portrait, and now we're going to argue about the terms of that.
And I think we did cover that in some way with the unsolicited gifts policy, the idea of restricted gifts and trying to not get ourselves in a position where we were bound by restrictions that came along with gifts. But we can look at that again also. So again, we'll bring this back to the committee, and then the board will see it again in the future, which may be 2 months from now, because that would be the next committee meeting. Okay, if there are no other comments or discussion on portraits.
We had our hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wendy, did you have your hand up?
I didn't see it.
I had my hand up, but one of the questions was about the exhibits, but also I would like to, I'm fine now because I've listened to Thomas and Lisa, but you have to remember, I don't have any of that language in front of me because it's not included. So when you're talking about the wording and whatnot, I'm trying my best to follow. So that's my fault because I'm on the phone. But I think I've got the gist of it. And as long as we're going to take it up again, I'm good.
I'll send it to you when we're done here, Wendy. Sorry, I did totally slip my mind. You couldn't see that.
Yeah,
well,
that's fine.
Yeah, this was the initial discussion as well. So, but great. Okay, so thank you everyone for the discussion. The last topic we talked about in the policy committee was sort of a similar but separate policy of staff memorials, and we didn't get that to a point where we're ready to bring that to a board for a first reading. So I'm just mentioning that we opened a discussion on that, got some issues onto the table, including the concept of naming rights. If that ever came up in a again, in a fundraising or other context, we really don't have any guidance in place or any policy in place one way or another on that. So we're gonna, we'll be continuing the discussion on that in future policy committee meetings. And that's everything I have.
Thanks. I would just remind all of the board members that you should keep your eyes on the agendas that are posted for any of the standing committee meetings. And if you have an interest in attending or participating in the committee meetings, you are always welcome.
I'll say a word on that, Marcy, because I think the way that those are publicized right now is they're just posted on the one section of the website, sort of a week in advance. And it would help me as a trustee to get maybe an email when those are posted, so that I could put it on my calendar. I guess when the most convenient would be to send me the agenda and then I'll see the time, and also I'll know what's going to be covered. But right now, it requires sort of an active effort by a trustee to sort of monitor that weekly, and sort of a reminder that would move me into more of a passive ability would be helpful to me. So.
Yeah, that's something that we can easily do. Send it out to all trustees, let them know about committee meetings. Just everyone has to remember which committees they're actually on, the ones that they have to attend, and then the ones that are optional for them. But better safe than sorry, just come to all the committees.
And your voices would be welcome. Thanks, Mike. Okay, moving on to old business. David has an update on the COVID response plan.
Yes, so staff is slowly moving through the phase 1B vaccination process locally, which is great. There have been some delays because of the weather and just kind of the news stories that I'm sure most of you all have seen. The staff that have not been able to get first dose appointments are still not able to get first dose appointments, but hopefully the changes that the state health department made last weekend to have a single sign-on will help that out some. But we do have a lot of staff that have gotten at least 1 dose and a few that have gotten 2. Yeah, that's good news there. Looking at the next phases for JMRL, the Emergency Planning Committee is meeting tomorrow afternoon. The first thing we're going to look at most likely is expanding hours in April, try to get back to full service hours where we can. The next phase after that would be potentially more patrons per appointment slot where buildings can handle it and where staffing can handle it. And then, so I'm looking way down the road here. That's not happening anytime soon, but within the months to come. Then hopefully after that, we'll be talking about tier 2 as into the spring things start to open up a bit, which would mean removing appointments and just opening up some doors a little bit. Clearly, we're not there yet in our community. We're not there yet as a country. We're not there yet as a library, but it looks like things are moving that way, maybe. I'm knocking on wood. So hopefully I'll be able to report expansion in the months to come. So the first thing we're going to talk about is potentially more hours where locations can handle it in April. We've got some numbers for you that I'll send out. Since July, we've had almost 400 virtual programs, been attended by 7,328 people. I got a note earlier from staff when we were talking, when Tasha and Tim were talking, the attendance at our book clubs especially has been phenomenal. And in fact, when we had a snow day, an ice day really last Wednesday, we gave staff the option of continuing to hold some programming that was scheduled that day for comp time later. Since it is virtual, not everybody on staff has the capacity to virtually host a program, and a lot of it is a lot of prep work that's in the building. But for those that could, we continued some of the programming, and I think we had record turnout for a lunchtime book club group that day because everybody was iced in and it was a convenient thing to do. So virtual programming still going strong. Staff is doing a great job there. We've circulated 611,000 items this fiscal year. 172,000 of those have been digital. So the digital materials are still going very strong, up almost 44% since the period last year, of kind of July through the end of January. Ordered, cataloged, and processed 26,209 new items. 49,643 people have signed on to use JMRL Wi-Fi since the pandemic started last March, or since we shut last March. We've created 3,532 new cards. 3,154 of those are virtual. So even with appointments and folks coming in, we are having a lot of folks who want to come in and make cards during their physical appointments. Still, the majority of the new cards are virtual. And 6,587 people have made appointments for tier 3 in-building service since September. And we did have the 1-week pause in January when the percent positivity was over 10% locally. The busiest branch in that sense has been Crozet with over 1,400 folks coming in. Nelson right behind that with 1,100. Northside with a little under 1,100. And then moving down the list there, Central with 800, Gordon with 370, Green with 960, Scottsville with 72, Louisa with 739. So it's gratifying for staff to be able to provide that service in a safe environment, and folks are really definitely taking advantage of it. Since September, we've had 738 people in buildings to use computers, which was one of the driving forces behind moving into this appointment service, was so that people could get in and use not only our machinery, but the network as well. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback from our jurisdictions, from the public about Tier 3 services, continue to move slowly in terms of reopening. We're hoping that the blip, hopefully it's a blip at UVA the past week or so, will remain there and get contained, but we're keeping a very close eye on it. If there's a community spread there, then we'll see it in our % positivity numbers. But we're prepared if need be to take a step back, but hopefully we're reaching a phase where we can start talking about steps forward. A lot of that just depends on what happens with the virus in our community. Any questions about where we are in our COVID response? It's not very different from where we were a month ago.
I just wanted to say thank you once again to you, David, and to the staff and everybody for all of this hard work to try to keep such a vital public service open and available to people in our community during this really horrible time. It's a terrible season, and I think the words essential workers get thrown around a lot. And I do believe that you are essential. I'm so grateful and wish that we lived in a society where we decided to put our monies where our priorities are, because I think that I think that all essential workers need to be essentially paid well. And that's not something that always happens. So I just want to say, in lieu of actual money, thank you, really. Really, it's so hard. And you all are making really difficult decisions to keep everybody safe as well as to have access. And it's a tricky thing. And I'm grateful for your leadership and for the dedication of the staff to help keep this working.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm sure the staff will appreciate that.
Mike, you had a comment or a question?
David, I think you've touched on this in previous reports, but my question is about what I would call excess demand, which is people who would like to use appointment service, but the slots are not available. How would you characterize that, if any, as far as that?
Yeah, we have a lot of very full appointment slots at many locations. And to date, we have been able to reschedule people for appointment times that are less convenient for them, but are available. So we have not at any point had to say to somebody, I'm sorry, we can't help you, except when we were closed for the 7-day period, or snow and weather. This has been quite the February, but we have always been able to reschedule folks for a different time. It's just not the time that they were choosing.
So then that rate of rescheduling, just in terms of a trend, is that sort of the same as last month, or is that increasing perhaps?
I don't have hard data on that in front of me, Mike, but anecdotally, I'm hearing a little bit more about it.
Yeah, okay.
So anecdotally, I would say that I'm hearing a little bit more, and in newer locations, about folks having to take a later time or later date.
Thanks.
Well, it's good to hear that there's consideration for increasing the hours for appointments.
Yeah, there's definitely been demand.
Good.
Is there one other hand raised, Marcy?
I don't see another hand up. Does anybody else have a question or comment? You better jump out.
Was it in attendees? Is Wendy showing up in the attendees list?
Yeah, Wendy, did you have your hand up?
Oh, only because I can't put my hand down. I'm trying, but it keeps telling me it's up.
Yeah. There you go.
So I'll just reserve, in case I'm.
All right. We'll move on to the budget that's currently under negotiation in the jurisdictions, David.
Okay, so I just wanted to share with you the dates that we are expecting the county administrations to hand off their proposed budgets to their boards of supervisors and city council, respectively. The earliest of which is this Wednesday, when Albemarle County's executive will be presenting Albemarle County's budget to the Board of Supervisors. So I'll be watching that and looking for the document when it comes out. This is really the biggest piece of the puzzle to fall for JMRL. And it depends a lot on what their projections are for next year and what Albemarle County is going to be able to do for their staff in terms of compensation and raises next year. if they fully fund that, then it makes it likely that JMRL will be able to fully fund a raise next year for staff. City of Charlottesville's budget will get to City Council on March 1st, which is the same date, I believe, for Louisa. Green on March 2nd. Nelson sometime in late February, early March. They haven't announced an exact date yet. So in the next 2 weeks here, we're going to have an idea of what our jurisdictions, what level our jurisdictions plan to support JMRL in next fiscal year. And I likely will be reaching out to some of you individually to talk about going to talk to these governing bodies as they make their budget decisions, if need be, in order to support library services. We have been through almost all of the preliminary budget meetings with staff, and some have also included elected officials. And things are looking pretty good. I think that, despite the pandemic, most of our jurisdictions have been able to make good use of the CARES funding that they got, and really, as JMRL has done, tighten belts this year so that next year hopefully will be manageable and full services will be available across the board. And just one other slight reminder on that normally equipment budgets would be coming in from staff to Jerry and I now, requests for next year from managers, and we'd be putting that together and then bringing it to the Budget and Finance Committee in order to review for inclusion in our final budget. But this year that is on delay until April. Managers have until April to make those requests because they only started getting things for this year after January 1. So that timeline is pushed a little bit on your end. The full board will still vote on your budget at the regular time, but the budget committee and the finance committee won't see the equipment budget until probably early May. That's all I have to report.
Good, thanks, David. But you do have the library director's report.
I do, yes. And exciting news for all of us, the audit is in. It did not make it in time to get it onto this this meeting, but I have physical copies for each of you, which I believe we're required to give to you. So I will mail those to your home addresses, and I can also email you the budget, the audit. We also now post it on the About page as well, so it's publicly available, both for our patrons and for our jurisdictions that want to see it. There were no significant findings this year. As expected, there is a liability increase for our vacation accrual in the future because we did not cap it last year. The board decided not to put a cap on so that folks would have a chance to use vacation this year. But otherwise, it's a thoroughly researched document that Jerry and I've spent a lot of time with. So have fun. I'm excited about a new offering from reference staff at Northside and Central, virtual tech tutorials, where folks can sign up for time with staff one-on-one to go through how to download downloadable materials, downloadable content, other tech questions they might have. So it's not quite the same as when we used to be able to bring people in and do this, because you still have to be able to connect in order to get the virtual tech tutorial, but it's just a link. Staff will email you a link directly, and once you're on there, they're yours for that 45-minute to an hour, I believe, slot. So I thought it was a very innovative program that came out of those two staffs. And finally, JMRL has been accepted in the Community Web's Community History Web Archiving Program. An application was placed by our historical collection librarian, Miranda Burnett. And this will mean some training, web archiving and technical support, and funding in the future for registration and travel to conferences, which of course are not happening right now. The big takeaway here is 3 free years of Archive It, which is an archival system for being able to store digital data, basically, up to 0.5 terabyte of local web material each year and help preserve it for our communities. So it's a way to kind of capture local history that's happening now digitally and preserve it for future generations. So I'll be talking more about it once we start to get more details about that grant and have an interface to start showing it. It's going to be a while we go through the collection process, but it's a big deal for us, and I'm very excited about it. And that's all I have to report.
That's wonderful. Thanks, David. Are there any other matters that board members would like to ask?
I just had a question for David about the penultimate thing you mentioned about the one-on-one service or tech service or training. Mm-hmm. Have you thought about, I was just thinking about what Kathy was saying earlier about how it can be very difficult or challenging for, seniors to, to connect. Even if you had thought about like promoting it at senior centers, or like she mentioned, like at her church, or different places where folks who might really need the education behind this, or the support, would be able to get it.
That's a great note. I've already got a note here to send Kathy a bunch of stuff that she can help me distribute, but we'll look out definitely at the senior center.
Hi, Kathy, I did not mean to volunteer you for more work. That was not my intention in making the comment.
That was my dirty deed there. But also likely, Parks and Rec has a good in all of our jurisdictions, and this is available, all throughout JMRL. All the Parks and Recs have good programming apparatus there. So that's a great note. Thank you, Lisa. We'll put together a list of folks that we can send these things to.
You could really help a lot of people by showing people how to get onto like Netflix or Instagram, so they can watch, there's some really fun things there. I don't know, it seems like you would think that everyone knows how to do this, but everyone doesn't. And so these are really, I love this one-on-one help. I think it's a really generous and good program.
Yeah, and I think that there's a twofold purpose here too, to be able to show all the resources that the library has available. So you mentioned Netflix, but of course the library also has a video streaming Canopy service, and also has digital magazines, comic books, audiobooks. So not only are we opening up a
way better, because Canopy is free. That's way better.
Agree with your library. So yes, thank you. Great note.
Thanks, Lisa.
I would just add that I'm still getting friends and people signed on to just virtual books and audiobooks. So that'll be great help if they just focus on that. They could have more than one person maybe at a time.
That's a good suggestion. So not just
a small group, like a small group. I love that idea.
It's the book club model.
Right.
Are there any other comments from the board? Any issues that you raise? Future agenda items. We will have more from the Personnel Committee at the next meeting, I believe. Is that correct, Carla?
Sure, actually. If we don't meet before the March board meeting, we certainly will before the April board meeting. So I will let you know.
Okay.
Is there any interest?
Any other?
Is there interest from the board in having the auditors make a presentation on the audit? Sometimes we have them come in. I think we had them in last year. That's something we can arrange if the board is interested.
I would be. If I'm the only one, I'd have to be set that up as an outside meeting with you, David. But I think that might be useful.
I might be David after I take a look at the audit.
I think having people have a chance to take a look at the audit, please get feedback to David, and he can either set up a small group of us, or he can bring it to the next board meeting, if that's something the auditors could do. Any other agenda items, David? We'll obviously have ongoing COVID reports, and
I think the conduct policy would be ready to make a motion or vote.
Correct. Does anybody have any issues that they would like to address in our continuing education sessions over the next few months? Obviously, the financial issues with the auditors might be one of those kinds of things, but is there anything else that people would like to understand more about the workings of the library or libraries in general? Okay, well, David and I will go down the list and see who's next to present to the board. If there are no other issues, do I have a motion for this meeting to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn. This is Wendy.
Hi, Wendy. Yes, and Tony was agreeing with you.
I second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much, and we will see you again in a month.
Thanks, Marcy. Thanks,
Thanks,
Thank you all for all your
everybody.
work.